Hey everyone, Adam here. So is our podcast, sitting down with David Booher and Drew Zucker, very talented comic artists who have done multiple titles now. We're mostly here to talk about your new horror one-shot, The Feeding, but you're also the creative team behind Canto, which is one that I loved, and we have an interview about that. People can find it on the channel. Enough of my rambling. David, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Adam?
Good. I'm doing really good. Sorry, I'm a little extra caffeinated right now, so I might be a little off the wall. How you doing, Drew?
That's cool.
I'm good. I'm good. Busy, but really good.
That's good. Good to hear. So I guess the first thing to ask would be The Feeding. This interview came out of New York Comic Con, which I couldn't attend in person, but how was that for you guys?
Well, I mean, it's the chaos of New York Comic Con, right? Just way too many people in a tiny little space and just crazy.
I thought we were going to have a relatively quiet show, and then somehow it turned out to be like busier than usual.
Oh, okay.
it was such a how'd that happen? But New York was fun. We had a good time.
Good. You're local there, aren't you, Drew?
Yeah. So
yeah, I came from
the hometown show.
Yeah, and I come from the West Coast out to New York. So San Diego Comic-Con is kind of my hometown show. So Drew comes out here for that one, and then I get to go to New York for that one. And it's fun to just sort of tear up Manhattan with Drew.
Just as big, just as crazy in San Diego.
It was the door opening was so creepy.
Oh, sorry, the cat went into the closet.
I was like, there is a ghost. This is going to go viral because it's a ghost in the background.
The animals know when I hit record. I could be in here all day alone, and now I got a dog here and a cat in the closet. And
we're going to be 50-50 if my dog decides that she wants to be a star and come over and start yelling.
Yeah, this one will get impatient soon.
Of course, we're recording like 3 days after daylight savings time ended. So my dogs at 3 o'clock are like, why aren't we fed and walked? And the evening has started. I'm like, dude, it's 3 p.m.
You got some time to wait.
Listen, slave, food meal, feed me.
Yes.
Well, it's awesome that New York went good. You guys are, names in the industry, so it's cool that people are finding your work and going to your booth and checking it out. Did you do a panel?
No. Did you do a panel?
I don't think so.
I don't think we either one.
I can't even remember. I can't even remember now. It's been like I think it's been a month, maybe 3 weeks.
It's been a month. Or no, 3 weeks. God, I have no idea about time.
Yeah, it's been a month since New York Comic Con, and literally it feels like it's been 15 months. We didn't do panels. We did a signing. So you mentioned The Feeding at the top. We just ran a Zoop campaign for a one shot that we're doing together called The Feeding. It's kind of a throwback of an EC Comics sort of mid 20th century horror, Tales from the Crypt, Tomb of Terror, I think it was called, Crypt of Shadows, that kind of thing. And so we just did a one shot. There was a really cool horror story that ran through Zoop. And one of the things we did at New York Comic Con was we printed a 100-copy New York Comic Con variant to promote the book. And we did a signing there. We did some Whatnot streams, and that sold out. So we were very pleased with that.
Very cool. You want to give the elevator pitch of The Feeding?
Sure. Yeah, it's sort of a throwback horror story in the vein of Twilight Zone, Tales from the Crypt. It's about this investment banker, Nolan Ward, who is a womanizer. He's a drinker. He's a casual drug user, partier, sort of not a great guy. But then he very quickly learned that he does all these things because he's been haunted all his life by this painting called The Feeding that is carnivorous, that eats people. And it's shown back up in his life, and it's hungry again. So the story is how Nolan faces this demon that's been haunting him in the form of this painting, and how he survives, how he deals with that new confrontation now in his life.
Yep.
Very cool. I know maybe not the last book, but very recently you were doing Canto, which was an ongoing series, which I know there's more we could talk about there. But my question for now is, how different was it doing Kanto, which was a long-running series with many chapters, to a one-shot?
Drew?
It was hard. It was so hard to go back to doing something like The Feeding, for no other reason than like me personally, I've spent so much time with Kanto in that world that coming back to drawing the real world it took a minute to figure it out again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You forget you forget the volume of information that your brain subtly passes over in the real world, but it knows that like the sum of its parts make up a total. So it knows that an environment doesn't read right if there isn't enough detail for it to kind of read what you would know it to be. But once we got back into it, part of what was exciting about this was because we had been doing Kanto for so long, we got to bring all of those tricks, the storytelling development, the skill development, and bring it into doing a horror book. And that was a lot of fun to transfer over all of that learned knowledge from the first volume of Kanto up to The Feeding.
So
yeah, I was going to say, from my perspective, it's switching gears is nice for one shot from this big epic like Lord of the Rings-esque adventure. It's nice to sort of switch gears and to have to tell a full story with the beginning, middle, and end in such a compact 32 pages. So there's no real space for extra anything. You just have to, it doesn't mean that it's a jam-packed story. You just have to be very efficient with all the space that you have. So with Kanto, you can plant things and come back to them 3 issues later, and you can just like spin out, let's talk about this character. So with The Feeding, it was a fun sort of puzzle challenge to get that back, to get into that compact storytelling space. And it's horror. Drew and I both love horror. We've loved horror all of our lives, and Kanto is fantastic because we both love fantasy, but to get to go to that horror well and sort of tell a story in that genre was fun. And I think we'll do it again.
Again, with The Feeding, or something totally original? Leave The Feeding as a one shot, or is that going to give away the end?
I mean, I think we should just. I'm an advocate of leaving it as is.
Yeah, what's a lot of fun about doing the one shots is it means that we get to experiment without commitment. Doing something like Kanto is a lot of fun, and we both are very cognizant of how lucky we are that we get to tell that story at that level and size with the level of support that we have. But there is something to be said for minimal commitment on our end, where we get to just, we did something like The Feeding, let's explore, maybe we want to do something involving a rural area and not necessarily in a big city, or we want to do something with a haunted house. Just, it lets us kind of not have to overdevelop something and plan for years in advance, but instead it's really just The Feeding is very much a jam piece between the two of us, and it's fun to have that kind of pure level of creativity where it's like we're not contending with all these other factors that have to be dealt with. It's just kind of like, let's just make a comic.
So it's, even though you have the challenge of you have 32 pages for your story, there is no chapter 2, get it all in now. It is freeing in the way that once you're done, you can say, done, let's do the next thing. That's a cool take.
Yeah, and there's, the anthology format is such an popular, it's popular both in comics and in TV, doing that either episodically or per season. And I could see Drew and I continuing to collaborate for new stories that are sort of, we'll figure out an overarching anthology for it, like a structure, and then continue to tell these individual stories, but sort of weave them all together into an anthology. that it's just me and Drew.
You also just don't know what comes out of doing this kind of stuff. Like what's fun about this is that it results in you writing down just dozens of ideas. And sometimes what starts as maybe a smaller idea, all of a sudden spirals into a much bigger idea. Or we do something down the road that it started as 32 pages. It felt really good. And we both have ideas about how to spin it out into something bigger because we want to stay in the world. Like that's kind of, it's very much, we're telling completed stories, but there's always that opportunity for us to, experiment with things and see, what's in this corner.
That is the fun of comics, where you're not really constrained by anything other than time. So just if you can take your time to tell the story, you can tell whatever story in whatever art style you want.
It's the best part about comics. You are only constrained by your time and your talent.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. It's also really cool that you guys got to switch gears into a different genre, because Canto's very high fantasy, and now you're going into some very grounded sounding horror. So that must have also been pretty fun to, I mean, you had a hard time getting your more realistic art style back, different muscle, but.
Yeah, well, once it came back, it got easier. I think for David's bounced around in other genres for a little bit now. So for him, he gets to exercise certain muscles a bit more than I do sometimes.
Yeah, it's fine. And that's just all about, for me, it's all about just passion for telling the story. So genre doesn't matter nearly as much to me as, is it a story that I feel really passionate about and I really want to tell. And if that spark is there, it's sort of, it doesn't matter, like the genre will come. I mean, I'm a horror fan, fantasy, sci-fi is really fun, comedy, drama, throwback 80s is really fun. So it's just what story is going to speak to me in those particular buckets, and then I'm happy to do it.
Do you find when you're writing you have a certain maybe signature or something you like to include that transcends the genres like you were just talking about? Like, is there any similarities you saw in writing Canto that you see in writing The Feeding, that you see in writing something else we haven't talked about?
Yeah, so I'm a character first guy. I think that there's so many comics out there that are premise based, and I mean, sure, it's a cool premise, but why should I care? Like, why should I care what's going on if I don't care about the characters who are put in that premise? So for horror in particular, I wrote a series that's based on a Joe Hill short story called Rain. And I that was published by Image. And then I wrote a horror series called Specs, which was published by Boom. And in both of those, I call them character first horror, because in both of those, the main crux of the story is the relationship between the main characters, and they're thrust into some terrible situation that just puts a spotlight on that relationship, on those characters. And you're really coming back for every page and every issue to find out how these characters deal with these situations, not necessarily to see what the next thing that's going to jump out of the closet is. And so I wrote a book, sci-fi comedy called Killer Queens for Dark Horse. And that one, it's a big fun comedy, space comedy, but also it's character first. I want to see what happens with these characters and what kind of boneheaded things they're going to do next. So for me, it's all about character. The Feeding was definitely a character study, because it's about this guy and how he deals with this painting that has come back into his life, and it's hungry and it needs another victim. So it's really about what he does. And by the end, I think it's really, we've created this wonderful, we've talked to a lot of people who have read it, and we've created this seemingly fantastic ambiguity at the end where you're like, I don't like him. Then I kind of start feeling bad for him. And then he gets to the end and you're like, hold up. Can I even trust what I've just read? So for me, that's the through line of everything, is the passion to tell a story, and then having the characters be the driving factor in these narratives, and not necessarily the plot or the premise of it.
And you mentioned when we first started talking about the feeding that you went through Zoop, and your press release for this is the first time I heard of Zoop. Is that like a Kickstarter type platform?
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. They're the way I put it is that they're a Kickstarter competitor, but they're kind of the comics element of it stripped out for like it's a very comic specific crowdfunding platform.
Okay. And do you mind if I ask why you chose that one over Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or I'm sure there's a million others?
I mean, we've been talking with the founders of Zoop for a long time about doing a project on their platform. It is focused on comics, and also there's a little bit. So this was already created. So we had all the book. It was done before we even launched the Zoop campaign. So really, Zoop operates as like a pre-order menu almost.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
had a goal. We had a funding goal. We were able to get in the first day, which was fantastic. And then afterward, it was just 30 days of getting folks to come over and just pre-order your A cover, your foil B cover, your black and white issue. And all of them are very limited print runs. I think since the campaign is done, I mean, you're looking probably at no more than 200 copies of any one of these variants. And they have the Zoop logo on the back. So really, it was our opportunity to offer variant covers like exclusives for Zoop for readers. And then down the road, we think we're going to be able to release this widely into comic shops through pre-orders, that sort of thing. So that will be a different cover. It will be different variants. Yeah. So this is an opportunity for folks to jump on board early because we think this is just the beginning of the life of the feeding as a story. And Zoop is a good place for that, for launching a book that's basically done, that we've collaborated on, that's really a pre-order platform.
It also was good for, I think that it kind of allowed us to do proof of concept in a way that it's a hard sell for a publisher to do 32-page one shot where there isn't a long-term investment from them. They want to make money and everything, as they should. But, I think that one shots can sometimes be a hard sell for them. So this allowed for us to, have the best of both worlds.
And on the flip side of that, it's done. Publishers frequently pick up books that have already been on Kickstarter and Zoop and other crowdfunding because it's already finished. Like they don't have to put any investment in art or letters or colors. It's all been finished. So really you're delivering a final product that they have to solicit for orders and print.
Yep.
And so even a one shot, horror is a really popular genre. So
yeah,
we knew we really couldn't go wrong by doing a horror book. And doing a one shot, it's convincing folks to spend $6 or $8 to buy a story that 15-minute story. And I think when the publisher's buying is super low, then it's easy for them to say, sure, we'll print it. We'll know how many pre-orders we have, and then we can print it, and then that's it. So we don't really have to. We'll take half. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And funding in your first day, obviously, there's an interest in this thing. So
I think so. I think we did. Yeah. We did well. Certainly well enough that it was kind of a sweet spot where we did well enough that the copies of this are going to be low enough that a publisher won't come in and say, oh my gosh, you did gangbusters. Where's the rest of the market for this?
Right.
But we didn't do poorly. So the publishers would come in and say, nobody wants to read this. You know what I mean? We hit that middle ground.
right in the middle.
Yeah. So publishers can say, oh, there's more. There's an untapped market if we just bring this broader. And clearly folks are interested in backing it. And everybody, I mean, we had the last day we put out a graphic on social media, all these little snippets of all these different quotes that we got. And there's probably 12, 15 different quotes from podcasters and filmmakers and comics writers and artists, and everybody who's reading it is really enjoying it. So we're excited to go beyond Zoop and really expand the audience for this. And if there is an appetite, look, there's nothing stopping us from doing a second story, putting it with the first story, putting a little overarching structure around it, and put it out there as a instead of 40 pages, or put it out as an 80-page anthology. Yeah. Keep building on that.
Yeah, for sure. How did you find the process of the crowdfunding going solo? Was it like a lot of this podcast and spreading the word, or?
So I had done this years ago with a book called The House, which was another horror story that I did with Philip Seavey. That was a full-on graphic novel, and we hand sold that thing for years, up until the point that we nearly sold out of the print run, and Dark Horse came in and took it over, and they now publish it. I was very hesitant to do crowdfunding again, because I knew the volume of what's involved with it. As far as like my professional opinion of it, crowdfunding is amazing. It is one of the great equalizers of either, if you have an idea, you can bring it to market. But I also knew what was going to be involved in this, and I was a little gun shy about it. But ultimately, I was, I am happy that we went that route with it, because it allows for us to do a lot of press like this, and it also allows for us to do a lot of like fan interaction in a way that sometimes I think can get lost in like doing FOC.
Yeah, I've never done crowdfunding before. And I talked to a lot of folks about it, a lot of folks that do a lot of crowdfunding. And I got most of the information. I was mostly prepared, but I was not prepared for, nobody told me the emotional, psychological, physical, metaphysical roller coaster.
Yeah, I should have warned you about
24 hours. 24 hours. It's literally
24. Try 4 days.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could see it tapering off. So the first 24 hours was the absolute worst, because you don't realize when you start that crowdfunding, you stop eating, showering, talking to other people, changing clothes, paying attention to your pets. Just, you don't do anything but you focus on that crowdfunding and watching those numbers, watching every backer come in, how much they got, what's going on, and you just cannot stop. It's like watching a train wreck. You cannot stop. You cannot look away. You cannot look away. So nobody warned me for 24 hours that I would lose all grounding in reality and just focus on this silly crowdfunding. So next time I will.
That's my bad.
No, that's okay. It's not your fault, Drew. It's just, and especially your first one. I think as you do other crowdfunding, you get more used to the rhythm of it. You get a lot of backers, and then things lull for a long time, and then sort of at the end you get another bump. So I would say, if anybody's listening who's looking at crowdfunding, gird yourself for those first 24 hours where the obsession of hitting that refresh button cannot be overcome. Yeah. You will not be able to overcome it.
Take the day off. That's all you're doing.
100% take the day off. You can't think of anything else.
I have fallen into that trap on crowdfunding campaigns that are not even my campaign, because I become enamored with how much they're raising, and I want to see how far it goes.
That's really an addiction.
Yeah, you're rooting for your friends, and you're hoping that things go really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like, whew, I was so exhausted after those first 24 hours. It's like releasing your first book or your first comic ever, and you're just so anxious about everything. I'm happy to say it took, I think, Drew, you're right. It took about 4 days probably to really just come back down to earth. And so you're just checking every day for 30 days. And then at the end, you're sort of seeing where things are. But I mean, the other aspect that was really, I guess, not surprising to me, but just really was such a time commitment, was the constant promotion on your own social media feeds.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel like you're throwing it out into the void. And the void's like tossing it back at you, like, we don't want this. We don't want this. So, but you have to, I remind myself when I put posts out, it's so funny. I put a post out of a photo of me, and it'll be like, comment, share, like. And then I put anything out about work that I'm doing. Drew, you have the exact same experience. Anything I put out of work I'm doing, it's
No
like
one cares.
tumbleweeds go by.
No one cares.
But I do take solace in the fact that the ratio of people who are paying attention and people who are actually interacting with your posts is it's a big ratio. People are seeing your posts. So I don't say that to discourage anybody from posting to promote your own work. Just do not have the expectation that you're going to, unless you're at the top, that people are going to interact with those posts. But they're not going unnoticed, because I would post and then I'd look at the campaign, and you can see the correlation between posting and people backing the campaign. So it's working, even if your likes are not, through the roof.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's something you have to do. It's just part of it.
The thing I liked about it this time around too is the last time I did this, I had no name to myself in comics, and podcasting was not really a thing yet. So it was nice that, like, I got to reach out to people who I only talk to kind of, on the fringes every now and then, who do podcasts, who do other stuff. And I know David kind of had the same experience. It was nice to be able to interact with people that are really, really good at what they do in totally separate industries, but we're all just like ultimately big horror nerds. So it was, that was probably my favorite aspect from behind the scenes of this entire project.
Yeah, that's
cool. We reached out to so many people about getting like quotes for blurbs, pull quotes, and that sort of thing. And I think in comics, a lot of folks get into this sort of echo chamber of everybody's quoting, giving quotes for everybody else's work, and it's just constant. And so what we ended up doing with the feeding is we reached out to a lot of our friends that are outside the comics industry, podcasters, directors, filmmakers, writers, who are all in the horror space. And I think we were able to make some fantastic connections with folks supporting the campaign. And my hope being that somebody who's in comics, who sees the 47th Booher blurb for some book, is like, oh, Booher likes another book. This is my surprise face. You get some folks who are outside of the industry coming in, and that lends a little bit extra credibility to the book. And hopefully it gets more backers.
That makes a ton of sense. Sorry, go ahead.
And if it gets them over to the people that are giving us blurbs, that's even better. Because the people we went to are people whose work, we personally respect and we enjoy.
Yeah, so it's a two-way sort of street, hopefully.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because an indie comic fan is looking for indie comics. But then if you follow this horror director who said, oh, I read this indie comic, it's awesome, you got to check it out, you're bringing in a whole new audience who might never have seen it.
And then on the flip side of that, if you're a horror, you love horror comics, and my buddies who have a horror podcast that they talk about horror movies and watch horror movies, and it's super fun. We're getting hopefully some of those comic people to cross over to the podcasting and the indie films, the horror films, and that sort of thing. So hopefully it's like this cross-pollination that I just don't think folks in comics utilize enough.
Yeah. We may ultimately have very selfish motives when we do it, because we're obviously supporting our own book. But that's also us, I think, out in the universe trying to do something good for the industry and expand readership where we can, and that goes back to Canto. That was Canto's entire mandate from before even David came to it, was that it was designed to be a book that that could be truly all ages, because I saw the danger of what was happening, without that kind of book within the market. And, then David came along and we developed it into what it is, where it became that. And it just continued. The feeding and the outreach and all these little, experiments we do are just continued experimentation from our end on how you can grow readership.
Yeah, that's really cool. It makes a lot of sense. And just because you're promoting your own book doesn't mean you're not doing that good that you were just talking about. Like, it can be both.
That's the hope.
Yeah. And you just brought up Canto before we started recording. David, you were saying that there's some new news with Canto also.
Yeah, we announced about a month ago that Canto has has phase 2 of Canto is happening at Dark Horse. So we've signed a multi-year licensing deal with Dark Horse to, we're going to be republishing all of the Canto material that's been published in beautiful hardcovers with brand new back matter and expanded content, which we're going to push into schools and libraries and bookshops, really expand that audience. And then they've also renewed us for lots more new issues going forward, single issues that are going to be then collected into these beautiful hardcovers. So we're very excited. Dark Horse does such an amazing job with books, with comics, and especially in the book market. So they're very enthusiastic about taking us on, and we were very enthusiastic about partnering with them. So right now you can actually pre-order volumes 1 and 2 in the hardcover through Dark Horse. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them at indie bookshops, comic shops, and they're coming out in June and July of 2024.
That's really awesome.
It is. It's wild how expanded these books are going to end up being. It's exciting.
Yeah, we're building out volume 1, and it's going to be like 190 pages.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful, big, heavy,
hard piles. Got literal piles of sketchbooks that I have to scan and send to them.
That's really cool, though. This little character is taking on a life of his own, and you're really running with it.
Yeah, we've got
plans.
So even though you've been working on other titles, it sounds like Canto, at least maybe an outline, has never really stopped.
No, we've been on hiatus a little bit because
the ideas are always.
We've had this, there's 5 volumes for what we're calling the Shrouded Man saga, and we had these basically sketched out before we published the first issue. So we knew where this was all going and roughly where it all, like the beats in the middle. So it's fun to see it all, have those big dreams right at the beginning and see it all being realized after, I think it's going to be 29 or 30 issues, chapters. Wow. This big saga.
Yeah, that's huge. That's awesome. So people can pre-order those volumes pretty much everywhere we can get comics right now. Is there anywhere where people can get the feeding right now, or since the Zoop's over, is it kind of in between?
I would suggest that you follow me and Drew on Whatnot. We both are very active there. My handle is at David Booher, and Drew, your handle is
at Art of Drew Zucker.
Okay. Follow us there because we're gonna overprint a little bit on what the Zoop campaign. So folks will be able to get a copy of the Zoop books through our channels. And then I would say follow us on social media. I'm most active on Instagram at David M. Booher, and Drew's Art of Drew Zucker on Instagram. And we will be announcing updates on the feeding as we go forward, because I think we will be returning to the wider market at some point in 2024.
Very cool. Well, guys, it sounds awesome. It sounds like you're keeping very busy, which is what you always want to hear for comic creators. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show again. It's really cool. I always love sitting down with you guys.
Sure, you can't
Thanks
keep
for
us away.
having us.
Absolutely. Anytime.
We're always happy to come on and hijack the show for a little bit.
Yeah. You guys made my job really. You had the segues and everything for me.
We got this, Adam. Why don't you
Yeah.
go?
I'll just take a break.
We'll be good.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.